righty, we are talking Dynasty buys and sells on today's episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Welcome in Lucas, Wenzel, Cameron, Lawrence, Tyler, Platt, all three fellas with you today.
Yes,
fellas,
sir.
out of the 12 players we are going to be talking about, how many trades have you made with these players this offseason?
I think we just had one trade between all three of us that included at least two, maybe even three of these guys. So
we have been following up on our word here is
Yes,
what we're
sir.
trying to tell you.
Except some of us are buying sells and selling buys. So
Under different circumstances, of
Yes,
course.
yes.
But in an ideal and perfect world, these are 12 players that you should be buying or selling in your Dynasty Fantasy Football leagues. Fellas, let's start with the buys and dive on in. So each of us prepared two players that we are looking to buy in Dynasty formats and two players that we are looking to sell in Dynasty formats. We are going to go ahead and start with the buys. Spoiler alert, we're talking about a crap ton of wide receivers here in the buys. Are we talking about 6 wide receivers that
We
you should be
are.
buying right now?
We
Oh
are.
my goodness. Maybe I need to change one of mine to a running back. This segment is called 6 wide receivers you should be buying in Dynasty leagues right now. Cameron, I'll let you kick us off here. Who is your first buy in Dynasty?
Yeah, my guy is Diontae Johnson, and you said wide receivers, but the reason is for wide receivers is the window is so much longer. That's why we buy wide receivers all the time and sell running backs, because you can just have them on your team for so much longer. You get so much more out of that trade. And I think you'll notice for my 2 wide receivers for sure, and I think a couple of your guys's, is the reason that these guys are buys isn't because we think they're going to be top 10 wide receivers. It's just the value that they are at right now is so ridiculous that it's like you can't pass them up. And that's the case for Diontae Johnson. He's a wide receiver 46 going into his age 28 season. And that is the prime for a wide receiver, is age 28 season. And right now you can get him on the high end for a mid-second. Like people will take a low second in 2025 for Diontae Johnson. I know last year was really disappointing. He missed 4 games. But before that, this guy had 144, 169, and 147 targets. I know he's on the Carolina Panthers, but he's also on a team that doesn't have a single separator. Adam Thielen was a separator, but Adam Thielen's gotten a heck of a lot older, right? He's no spring chicken anymore, right? Let's just put it that way. But if Bryce Young needs a first down, Diontae Johnson's the guy he's going to go to. And that's what it comes to. And back in 2022, his last healthy season, he was 6th in the league in targets, 13th in target share, 18th in air yards, 10th in red zone targets. Funny enough, he still didn't score. He didn't score a touchdown that year, right? That was the year 2022 where it was just like, how do you have 147 targets and not score a touchdown? Well, it helps that your quarterbacks are Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett, which is also why he was 2nd in unrealized air yards. And then he was 11th in route wins. So Diontae Johnson, to me, it kind of feels like how we've talked about Joe Mixon over the last couple of years. It's going to be gross. Don't watch the stinking game, but he's probably going to end up with 9 targets, 6 catches, 70 yards, and then a touchdown here or there. That's what Diontae Johnson feels like to me. And at wide receiver 46, you're getting him for basically nothing.
Dave Canales is the new head coach. A little quarterback whisperer, helped get Baker Mayfield back on track, made Mike Evans very fantasy relevant. Yeah, you mentioned it. You talk about the wide receivers in Carolina. Sure, they just went out and got Xavier Legette as well. There's a rookie curve there as well. And I think Diontae Johnson is going to be the primary option Bryce Young is looking for in what should be a bounce back year for him.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I like Diontae Johnson as a buy right now. He's nothing flashy, but you also don't have to pay that much for him to be a depth piece on your team. If you are deep at wide receiver, he is a great bench stash in my opinion. Ty, what are your thoughts?
I personally just don't want a locker room cancer of a teammate because obviously like it impacted pick. So I don't really want Diontae Johnson.
Oh my gosh.
You're ridiculous.
I'm just saying that because that report is absolute like bull honky. Like it has no merit at all and all that stuff. But look, like Diontae, like you said, Cam, he is the only separator in that wide receiver. Xavier Legette, your guy, Xavier Legette.
Spaghetti, yeah.
Yeah, old man Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo, JT Sanders, who they took in the draft as well at tight end. There's going to be one guy that is going to be open the most, and it's Diontae Johnson. So he's just going to get peppered with targets. And especially, I have to think early on in the season too, Dave Canales is going to have a very simple game plan for Bryce Young, and he's just going to go from, confidence to confidence and just try to build up it's kind of similar to what McDaniel did with Tua a little bit, and like offenses are going to be very different, but it's just instilling and installing confidence in Bryce Young, and Diontae is going to be that guy for him. So I very much like Diontae as a buy this year.
We all thought it was going to be this next player we're going to talk about, who was going to be a trade to the Carolina Panthers this offseason. Ended up being Diontae Johnson, which actually transitions us perfectly to Ty, your first player, or I guess for this section, wide receiver you are looking to buy this offseason.
Yeah, my first buy is T. Higgins. And honestly, I was pretty out on T. Higgins, and I had said that he was a sell what feels like a couple months ago. And I personally have just come around on T. Higgins, because when you just look at how things are currently laid out for T. Higgins situation-wise and in his opportunities, I think it's pretty ideal, and you're getting him at a value that is reasonable and potentially a little too low even, right? As things stand, right, there is a trade request out to get out of Cincinnati, but he has also said that, he would like to stay in Cincinnati as well. So let's look at it from the perspective of he gets traded somewhere. If he gets traded, he's going to go to a team that looks at him as a wide receiver one, because they will need to pay up for him, right? If he were to stay in Cincinnati, he is still a part of one of, if not the best passing attacks in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And it's hard to, so in that regard, it's hard to say that a trade negatively impacts him, and staying put negatively impacts him. And if anything, it just kind of keeps him at this level that he's been producing at for the past 2 to 3 years. That level has not been ideal, because it's really been like 110 targets max. So when is the breakthrough actually going to happen for T. Higgins in Cincinnati? If he were to stay, it's this year. In my opinion, it's this year. You look at how the Cincinnati Bengals have gone throughout their offseason. They let Tyler Boyd walk. It doesn't sound like there's any a chance for him to return to Cincinnati, and they traded Joe Mixon to Houston. Between those two guys, that's 162 targets opened up in that offense. And all that they did to address those losses in the passing attack were to draft Jermaine Burton in the 3rd round of the draft and sign Zach Moss, who, look, now you've got Zach Moss and Chase Brown. They'll probably get 30-ish targets each. There's still 100 targets to go around, and I doubt that Jermaine Burton is going to hit the ground running. There is a good amount of targets that could go to T. Higgins this season. So little to no competition, more opportunities for Higgins then. I just think right now his value is kind of that low-end wide receiver too. I just don't think he is going to finish that low really moving forward for the next 2 to 3 years. It's a value. I personally believe it's a bit of a steal, but some people may say it's pretty accurate for his value. I say go get T. Higgins, and giving up JSN in the process, giving up George. I would take George Pickens and go try to go get T. Higgins with George Pickens. Then I think I think T. Higgins is one of the best buys right now in Dynasty.
What's great about T. Higgins being a buy in Dynasty is, what you already mentioned, Ty, is the fact that this offseason or this season he could be traded to a new home and a team that's going to have to pay him. The problem is the T. Higgins manager has zero clue if they want to take that risk. If they don't, does he stay in Cincinnati? Which I actually think makes him a more likely buy than anything else. Because I think the manager, if you give him something more sure, something more concrete, the JSN one feels a little bit dicey to me because he feels more uncertain than T. Higgins. But if you were to give them a more surefire, locked and loaded player, as a T. Higgins manager myself, my team's in a rebuild, so I'm not as interested in moving T. Higgins. But if you give someone a surefire piece where they know what they're getting, and they can eliminate this dissonance of, is T. Higgins going to be a Bengal or not? I actually think he's a more likely piece to be traded off of dynasty teams, and for you to acquire, right? So, right, making the inverse case of you can buy him because other people might be more willing to sell him because of the uncertainty. Anything you want to toss in, Cameron?
Yeah, I just think his 2022 season, right? That was disappointing. It was because Jamar Chase missed time, and he was still the wide receiver 18. So right now on keep trade cut, just because that's feels maybe not quite consensus among like everybody, but I feel like it's pretty close for the dynasty rankings. They have him ranked right now as the wide receiver 21. Okay, so if he had a bad season, was the wide receiver 18. I mean, as long as Joe Burrow, as long as his quarterback doesn't get hurt like last season, as long as he's not hurt like he was last season, I feel T. Higgins is a pretty safe bet to outperform where he's at right now, and he's only 25 years old. So he's got quite a few years ahead of him. And then if someone's going to pay him, they're going to pay him Devonta Smith money or close to it, which is quite a lot of money, right? I mean, that's a significant investment plus the whatever draft capital you got to give up to go get him. So yeah, I love T. Higgins as a buy.
I'm going to move on to another wide receiver because we have 4 more to cover. Younger than both of the guys we've talked about. And I think not enough people are talking about Zay Flowers and the winner that he actually was in the NFL draft. All the Ravens did to improve this wide receiver room was draft Devonta Walker in the 4th round. They let Odell Beckham Jr. walk. They re-signed Rashad Bateman, but as much as we don't like to admit it, he's been a non-factor his entire career. And these are typically the kind of players you should be all over in dynasty leagues. These second-year players looking to make a sophomore leap with opportunity available to them. Yet we aren't talking about Zay Flowers in the same light as a Drake London, as a Garrett Wilson last year. Now, I understand those guys are better prospects than Zay Flowers. And sure, you still have Mark Andrews, but he's getting older. He's only played 2 fully healthy seasons in his career. And considering all of this, then you look at Keep Trade Cut, right? That crowdsourced dynasty tool. This is why we use it on podcasts. It's not the most accurate tool you should use for trading, but we use it on podcasting and social media content in general because it's crowdsourced. It is coming from people who actually play the game of fantasy football and not just, an ideal or a concept that someone else has come up with. But Zay Flowers is in the same tier as Jordan Addison, as DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, Nico Collins, T. Higgins, who we just talked about, Tank Dell, JSN. I would trade at least 3 of those guys that I just mentioned straight up for Zay Flowers. So I don't think it's as expensive as people may think it actually is to go out and trade for Zay Flowers right now. When you're looking at a second-year player who's looking to make a leap with opportunity available to him, it might not be down the field, high-scoring play opportunity. But if you're talking about volume underneath, the number one wide receiver, in this Baltimore Ravens offense, Zay Flowers is just a screaming buy to me because I don't think people are valuing him properly.
Yeah, I agree. My only concern with Zay Flowers is just what is the ups, like how capped is the upside being in this Ravens offense, just knowing, the way that they run the offense right now. They got Derrick Henry, so they're going to run the ball, and knowing that Mark Andrews, I still believe is the number 1 pass catcher in that offense.
He is.
So as the 2, right, and he's not that big down the field threat. So that's my only concern. I still think you should be buying him, but I just think you're not buying him to go out and win you weeks, right? You're buying him to get another solid piece that you can sit in your lineup that you're going, okay, I can get 12 to 15 fantasy points a week from Zay Flowers, and it's going to be pretty consistent, right? I'm not hoping for like a giant 30, which I think like a Jordan Addison right? Although he's a wide receiver too as well, in the way that they kind of run that offense, the way that he's a down the field threat, might have, that higher ceiling. So I think it's just understanding how you want to build your team, but I definitely don't hate him as a buy.
Could he have a second half of last year Rashee Rice level of upside, where Rashee Rice is giving you top 10, top 12 numbers, latter half of the season? Does he have that kind of upside? Because that's what I think you're getting. Well, we'll talk about Rashee Rice in a moment, but I mean, from week 12 on, he was the wide receiver 8 in PPR formats.
Yeah.
And I understand there's a lot of volume attached to that. There's touchdowns attached to that. And I get it's not the exact same as, Zay Flowers situation, but when you talk about a Kansas City Chiefs offense with Travis Kelce there and Rashee Rice, I'm looking at Baltimore and I'm kind of seeing the same thing. And that's dependent on Lamar being just as good of a passer as Patrick Mahomes is. I'm not going to make that argument, but I don't know. Like when I look at low ADOT guys, but guys who could potentially just get a ton of volume and are the number one wide receiver option, like Zay Flowers, I think still has that kind of Rashee Rice second half of the season upside to him, especially if he's looking to make a leap in his sophomore year.
I just like the fact that Zay Flowers is such a threat after the catch that he is just kind of a big play waiting to happen. And yes, Mark Andrews is still there. Derrick Henry will complicate things a little bit, but Zay Flowers, 108 targets last year as a rookie. He was 15th in yards after the catch. He had 77 receptions. I wonder if along those lines of a Rashee Rice upside, second half of the year upside, where the passing game is not going to be as formidable, I will say, because Lamar is going to be dealing with pressure. I'll just be honest. I mean, you lose Kevin Zeitler, you lose John Simpson, you lose Morgan Moses, and you didn't exactly, patch up all the holes on that offensive line. You're going to need to get the ball out quicker. That kind of feeds right into Zay Flowers.
I was going to say, they're talking about guys who had low ADOTs, ran low yardage per routes last year. I'd say Flowers. That's kind of written all over it.
Yeah. So I very much like the Zay Flowers idea, because I think a lot of people too, there's a perceived notion that Baltimore is just going to always run the ball. That's all that they want to do. And yes, you do have Lamar and Derrick Henry, but it feels like the Chargers narrative all over again. Like, you have to throw the ball. Like, that's just part of the game, right? So if Zay Flowers is going to be averaging 8-9 targets a game, he's probably catching 7 of those, and he's probably getting it 70, 80 yards. That's super ideal.
Mix in a touchdown in there as well. I think he will score more this season, but I digress. Zay Flowers, I love him as a buy candidate. Let's keep moving on the wide receivers, though. Cameron, your second wide receiver buy candidate is one that I really love, and I think a lot of people aren't going to be happy that you're saying, "Oh, go out and buy them." But I think you can kind of find the balance of, he is a great buy, but we also have to recognize the risk and the grossness that might come with this player.
Yeah, it's Christian Watson, and if you watched your show at all last year, this one might surprise you. I know I had actually said that he was kind of flying off our draft or my dynasty board earlier in the year, but it's the fact that he's a wide receiver 40 again. I mean, he's 25 years old, and the reason I was so out last year is because I was wrong and didn't believe in Jordan Love. Well, Jordan Love proved me wrong, and I really just got lucky by the fact that Christian Watson couldn't stay healthy, that it looked like, the right pick to be out on him. But that is the question, right? Can he stay healthy? He had 2 big hamstring issues last year, and if I'm not mistaken, it was a hamstring issue his rookie year as well that he struggled with, couldn't stay on the field from. But after his first game back, so from the second game back to, I think he played 7 games more, he had 7, 5, 8, 2, which stinks, 7, 4, and 7, and 9 targets. So 49 targets in 8 games, or about a little over 6 a game. In that same time frame, Jayden Reed had 39. Now, I understand Reed was a rookie, right? And he's still acclimated to the offense. He looked a lot better at the end of the year. And now, is that because he's just getting better, or is that because Christian Watson wasn't around, right? I think we have to kind of weigh those two. But let's be honest, this is an ambiguous wide receiver room at best. I mean, at best. And Christian Watson, we know, is a dynamic player. We know he's a big play threat. We know he's got the speed. He's got the size. He's got pretty decent hands. I mean, he's prone to, I think, a couple like easier drops, but at the same time, he had that touchdown in Kansas City last year where he's got, I don't remember who it was, draped all over him in the back of the end zone. And there was the last play he got hurt on, missed the rest of the season for. But at the wide receiver 40, for a guy that could potentially be the wide receiver 1 for a very up and coming quarterback, I understand, like, he definitely could be the wide receiver 2. But even if he's the wide receiver 2 in this offense, like the clear wide receiver 2, at wide receiver 40 in Dynasty at 25 years old, you're not going to lose if you buy him there, right? If he's the wide receiver 2, unless he's like just can never stay healthy. That is the only concern. But I don't know if we've seen enough to indicate, okay, his hamstrings will just never be good, right? I think it's just been tried to rush it back last year. And so I'm not worried about that. So yeah, I think the value indicates go by Christian Watson.
I'm so proud of you. You're coming around to Christian Watson. So proud of you. No, I think for me, when it comes to Christian Watson, it's the fact that the Green Bay Packers last year were a top 12 scoring offense in the league. Everyone now has a year of experience under their belt. And Christian Watson, again, big play written all over him. He is kind of a red zone target. He is the red zone target. Can I say, like,
yeah,
this Green Bay offense is going to, I am expecting this Green Bay offense to continue performing and producing like they were at the end of last season when they were on the verge of upsetting the San Francisco 49ers and almost having a path then to the Super Bowl. So this Green Bay offense, I've said this before. I hate saying it because I'm a Vikings fan. You guys are Vikings fans. I hate how much I'm going to have invested in this Green Bay offense this year. But they're going to be very, very valuable when it comes to fantasy, and especially in Dynasty, because this is a super young offense.
What you're paying for Christian Watson essentially is to take a chance on Xavier Leggett or Ricky Pearsall.
Yeah.
That's what you're taking a chance on with the wide receiver 40. And those guys might even be valued higher than Christian Watson right now. Can someone fact check me on Keep Trade Cut?
Actually,
yes. I don't have the rankings in front of me.
No. I think Watson's just higher.
Okay.
Yeah, Watson's one spot higher than Leggett.
But so you're essentially giving up what? The 205 to go get Christian Watson?
Yeah.
And I would rather go take a chance on a guy who, looking at last season, 7 targets, 5.82, 7.4, 7.9, and scored 20 plus in his last 2 games before injury. I mean, this is a guy, when they figured out how he fit with Jordan Love, they took advantage of it. And again, you're not giving up much. I frankly would much rather take a chance on Christian Watson than I would seeing how Ricky Pearsall ends up behind Brandon Ayuk or Debo, whoever they don't get rid of, Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle. And same for Xavier Leggett in a worse offense.
Yeah. No,
so this is a no-brainer for me. Christian Watson is just the clear cost-benefit analysis, and it is such a low cost for potentially such a high benefit. This is a no-brainer.
Yeah. Ricky Pearsall, I just checked, wide receiver 39 right now, 1 spot ahead of Christian Watson. And Christian Watson's
hasn't been traded.
And Christian Watson's on an offense where he could be the wide receiver 1 on an offense that threw the ball 90 more times than the San Francisco 49ers did last year. Wide receiver, the 4th best target on a team, or maybe 5th best target, or a guy who could be the 1st best on a team that throws the ball more.
It's a no-brainer. Yeah. It is a no-brainer from a cost-benefit analysis perspective.
Yep.
Ty, we'll kick it over to you. Man, I really sneaky like this buy too. Again, it's not a sexy name at all, but just looking how this team is filled out in the offseason, I think it's kind of, again, there's no choice. He is definitely a value to buy right now.
Yep. And Christian Kirk, ladies and gentlemen, is somehow, some way flying right under the radar when it comes to talking about this Jacksonville offense. Yes, they went out and drafted Brian Thomas Jr. Yes, they went out and signed Gabe Davis. Yes, Travis Etienne is still their running back. Evan Ingram is still there as well. And I think part of the reason why Christian Kirk is flying under the radar, though, is because he did get hurt last year and he missed 5 games. So I just want to remind the people, Christian Kirk is the wide receiver 1 in this offense as things stand right now. Experience, familiarity with the offensive scheme with Doug Peterson. Christian Kirk is the wide receiver 1. And I think a lot of people will go, oh, if he's the wide receiver 1, like how good can it be? I'm not going to go all the way back to 2022, right, when he finished as a top 12 wide receiver, because he did finish 5th in red zone targets somehow and had 8 touchdowns. I don't think we're going to see those kind of numbers again. No. But the fact is, he's just a volume play because there is no wide receiver like Christian Kirk in this offense. Like I said, Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis, 2 outside guys that, quite frankly, aren't always going to be open all the time, don't necessarily separate as well. I mean, Brian Thomas can separate, but that's because he's running in a straight line and he's got 4.33 speed, right? I'm going to keep this one short and sweet. I just think Christian Kirk, pure volume play. Yes, his upside is relatively capped just because, again, you've got younger talent and you're a slot wide receiver. But I don't care. If you just need someone that is going to catch the ball, score every now and then, kind of similar to Zay Flowers, except not the same yards after catch and 5 years older than he is.
I was going to say 5 years older.
Again, I'm just going to repeat myself for the 3rd time. He's a volume play, and his value is somehow lower than in years past, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because nothing has really affected him in terms of what the team has done around him. So it, again, not sexy, but sometimes you just need to get these guys to just fill a role on your fantasy team. And Christian Kirk does exactly that.
As the longest standing Christian Kirk stan on this podcast, coming to his defense when nobody wanted to defend him after that heinous contract that the Jacksonville Jaguars gave him. Cameron, I will let you insert your thoughts here because you already know that I am in support of this pick.
For me, a bet on Christian Kirk is a bet on Trevor Lawrence. If you think Trevor Lawrence is going to improve up of last year, if you think he's going to take a step forward from 2022, you buy Christian Kirk. If you don't believe that, then you stay away from Christian Kirk. I mean, I think he's a buy because I believe in Trevor Lawrence. But if you don't believe in Trevor Lawrence, then do not buy Christian Kirk. That doesn't make sense. So I think that's kind of your decision, because if Trevor Lawrence does better, Christian Kirk's going to catch more passes. He's going to have more touchdowns. If he doesn't, then it's going to be pretty similar to what we saw last year.
I want to ask you guys real quick, though. If you were to do just a simple pick swap with Christian Kirk in a rookie draft, mid-second round pick, again, let's do, I mean, Ricky Pearsall or Christian Kirk or Xavier Legette and Christian Kirk.
Christian Kirk.
Yeah, I think so too.
No question. I don't want to play the question game. Why? Why would I bother playing that game when I can get a surefire asset in Christian Kirk?
Yep. Bingo. Sure. Yep. And there are people that would rather take the youth, and sure, maybe,
which I get.
Sure, but if you are looking for pieces to win now, Christian Kirk is going to help you win more than Ricky Pearsall or Xavier Legette.
Yep, for sure.
I'll kind of build off of what Cameron said around Trevor Lawrence. If you believe in Patrick Mahomes, you should buy this player. That's a terrible transition, but here's the thing. You can take advantage of all the nearsighted people in your league with Rashee Rice. Now, not nearsighted as in they can't see more than 2 feet in front of them. Shout out to all you nearsighted people out there. My wife is one of them, so we love you. We have an appreciation for you. But nearsighted as in, like, whether he gets suspended 4 games, 6 games, 8 games, I really don't care, because we are playing Dynasty Fantasy Football. We are not playing redraft. We are not playing best ball. We are playing Dynasty Fantasy Football, where Rashee Rice is suspended 4, 6, 8 games this year. We are playing 4, 6, 8 years down the road. Okay. I also really don't care that the Chiefs drafted Xavier Worthy, that they brought in Marquise Hollywood Brown this offseason. Does it add target competition? Of course it does. I'm not going to be ignorant to the team situation, but these dudes play on different levels of the field. I was looking at fantasy points. Rashee Rice, his average depth of target last year was second lowest of all wide receivers with at least 150 targets at 5.2 yards per target. It was disgusting. Just for comparison, Marquise Brown's was up at 12.7 in Arizona last year. And you look at Xavier Worthy's prospect profile, it is the definition of a field stretcher. Okay. I'll also add in favor of Rashee Rice now that despite an incredibly low average depth of target, his 2.62 yards per route run was 10th best in the league last year. Again, that's per fantasy points. Now you boil in the fact that teams played too high safety coverage against the Chiefs at a top 10 rate last year. I think Rashee Rice's role is far more sustainable than the public realizes because he's currently ranked as the wide receiver 32 on Keep Trade Cut. The wide receiver 32. He was a top 20 dynasty ranked wide receiver before everything that happened this offseason. And now he's outside of the top 30. Just because we don't know if he's going to be suspended 4 games or 12 games this season. I frankly don't care because I will gladly tear down from DK Metcalf and pick up Rashee Rice plus. I will gladly tear down from Jordan Addison and pick up Rashee Rice plus. If managers of Rashee Rice are going to be that nearsighted, it is a no-brainer. You need to go out and take advantage of them because picking up Rashee Rice plus by getting rid of guys who frankly might not perform in the stretch that Rashee Rice has suspended, that is just a smart managerial dynasty move. So it is baffling to me that so many people can be so nearsighted on Rashee Rice that people who are frankly looking to add depth and win now, I will gladly tear down and pick up Rashee Rice plus in the process.
No, I agree. And the thing too is, they keep adding pass catchers. This team threw the ball 635 times last year. The Commanders led the league in pass attempts with 636. So they had one less than the league leader. That is 37 times per game. So unless you think Marquise Brown, Xavier Worthy, and Travis Kelce all have 150 targets, Rashee Rice is going to be just fine, right? I mean, that's what it is. And the fact that Mahomes found another receiver that he actually has good chemistry with should be huge. I mean, right? I'm not saying he's going to be the next Tyreek Hill or anything, exploding. But since Tyreek Hill left the 2 seasons before, he didn't have chemistry with any other wide receiver. Now he's got with Rashee Rice. He's not just going to move off of it because he's got some shiny new weapons on the outside.
What are teams going to do now that they added Xavier Worthy on the outside? What are they just not going to play too high safety anymore?
Yeah.
Like,
no,
are they just going to stop doing that? Like, they will play even more too high safety coverage probably. Another thing that I got pulled per fantasy points. Patrick Mahomes, 65% of his passes were 9 or less yards last year, which is just crazy. Again, screams Travis Kelce, screams Rashee Rice. So screaming by, we're being too nearsighted here, people. We're playing dynasty, not redraft. Go out and tear down from your DK Metcalfs and go do yourself a solid and pick up Rashee Rice in the process. We'll wrap it up there for the buys. Fellas, let's take a quick break. We'll come back with the sells. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back and we are going to transition onto the sells now, where we will finally get a player that is not a wide receiver. Cameron, kick us off with your first sell.
Yeah, it's Kenneth Walker. And I'm going to be honest, I kind of joked before we started that we just traded for ourselves. I did just trade for Kenneth Walker, but it's because I was moving back from the 107 to the 109 and I got to pick up Kenneth Walker in the process, right? So sometimes even if they're a dynasty sell, the value is good enough, that. And so that's I think something we want to clarify too is, and it doesn't mean in every situation that every player is a buy and sell, right? Like you shouldn't be buying Diontae Johnson for a 2025 early first, right? It's if you can get the value on him. You shouldn't be selling like Kenneth Walker for pennies on the dollar, right? It's if you can get the value on him. But for me, Kenneth Walker, the issue is he's ranked as the running back 9 right now in keep trade cut, but I don't believe that he possesses the upside to be a top 5 running back on any given season. I just don't see that happening with his role. And if I'm going to have a top 10 dynasty running back, I want them to have that upside. Guys like Kyron Williams, Jonathan Brooks, James Cook, Rashee White, Isaiah Pacheco. I can see, a way for all of them to get into the top 5. Kyron and Rashee White were just there, right? I don't know if it's as easy for Isaiah Pacheco or James Cook because I don't know if they're going to get the touchdowns or the, necessarily the usage to get up there. But they're in that same, similar spot that Ken Walker is, so I'd rather tear down to them. I think he's a small step ahead of those guys just because of his, where he was drafted, how young he is. We see what kind of a big play guy he is on the field. But he also has Zach Charbonnet, who was also a second-round pick in that backfield, who from week 8 on last year, after Charbonnet came back from injury, played at least 40% of snaps in every single game. There was multiple games where he outsnapped Kenneth Walker, right? And he had more receiving work than Kenneth Walker. Well, the thing with Charbonnet, too, is he only scored 1 touchdown last year. If you're going to tell me that you think Zach Charbonnet for the next 2 seasons is only going to score 1 touchdown a year, you're crazy, right? I mean, Zach Charbonnet runs about as hard as any running back in the NFL. So, yeah, he's going to find the end zone. And you look at Ken Walker's stats last 2 seasons, 228 attempts in 2022, 1,050 yards, 9 touchdowns. Last year, 219 attempts, 905 yards, 8 touchdowns. Hasn't had over 30 receptions in a season yet, which is not great, especially unless you're playing in a standard league. And I'm looking at guys who were in the top 15 last year with less than 34 receptions or 2 per game. There was 2 of them. One was Raheem Mostert. And yeah, he had about the same amount of carries, 209. He had about the same amount of yards, 1,012. But he had 18 freaking touchdowns. Ken Walker isn't going to have 18 touchdowns this season. The other guy in the top 10 was Derrick Henry, who had 280 carries, 1,167 yards, and 12 touchdowns. Could Ken Walker potentially hit that? Yes, but Henry is still the running back 8, and he was still the running back 11 in points per game. So if that's his ceiling, I just don't know if I can justify him being at the running back 9 spot and holding on to him or paying that price for him.
I'll phrase this like you did with Christian Kirk. A bet on Kenneth Walker is a bet on the Seattle Seahawks offense reverting back to 2022.
Yeah.
Is basically betting on that team being on fire on the offensive side of the ball where they can afford to run the football. I mean, Ty, you and I talked about this. What was this? 2 episodes ago, where the Seattle Seahawks couldn't run the ball last year because they're playing behind in every freaking game. So these snap shares are getting split because you're 100% right, Cameron. Zach Charbonnet's coming in for all the receiving work. So Ken Walker's not needed as much. And people say, well, yeah, but when he's in the game, he, like you said, he runs harder than anybody. And their roles are so different where Ken Walker is guaranteed the groundwork. And again, you're looking at guys who you just talked about, Raheem and Derrick Henry, who are guaranteed the groundwork. It's either 15 plus rushing touchdowns or 275 carries at least. And I don't think either are obtainable for Ken Walker. So I am with you where he might, maybe some people will see him as like appropriately valued, but frankly, where I think he's appropriately valued is closer to his ceiling than his floor. And I'm worried that floor is going to come sooner than we want. And I'm just looking to move off running back sooner rather than later. So I'm with you that Ken Walker's a sell. Ty, is there any additional thoughts you're going to chime in with?
So new offensive coordinator for the Seahawks. His name is Ryan Grubb, I believe. He's coming over from Washington, where he just coached Michael Penix Jr., Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, and Jalen McMillan. 3 wide receiver sets often means shotgun, right? Shotgun formations. Last year, between Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, Charbonnet, his carry rate from shotgun was 56.5, and Kenneth Walker's was 42.5. I'm not going to sit here and make the assumption that Seattle is going to go shotgun, majority of the time or whatnot. But that's what Ryan Grubb is most familiar with. And if you wide receivers for the Seahawks, you've got 3 pretty dang good wide receivers. So does using any formation outside of 3 wide receiver sets the majority of the time make a ton of sense? Probably not. So again, I'm jumping to conclusions if I were to say, like, Zach Charbonnet is the Seahawk running back that you want to have. But I think it's not that far of a stretch to say that Kenneth Walker's outlook and projection and predictions that we can make are very few and far between. It could really go one of many different ways, and I feel like most of those ways don't benefit him as much.
I mean, you're maximizing value on Ken Walker right now, just as we talked about. So let's move on because it's time to fight. It's time to fight on this podcast. 2 of us agree this player is a sell, Tyler being one of them because it's his first sell candidate, and one of us doesn't. So while Ty explains why his first sell is someone he's looking to sell, you can try and figure out between Cameron and I who agrees with Ty. So go ahead, Ty. Who is your first sell candidate?
My first sell candidate is no other than Mr. Devonta Smith. And the only reason why he's a sell is because he's on Cam's dynasty team. Move on.
He's on both my dynasty teams.
He's on both, right? Multiple shares.
You fool.
You fool. No, the reason why I say Devonta Smith is a sell partially is because his value is as high as it is, because it's like a fringe top 15 wide receiver. And I think part of that is just because they're bringing in Kellen Moore. This is going to be a high scoring offense. It's not as great as it seems. I'm just going to be honest for Devonta Smith. Okay. In Kellen Moore's play calling history, right? 4 years in Dallas, last year with the Chargers. Wide receivers have finished all over the place, right? 2019, wide receiver 10, wide receiver 22, wide receiver 44. That was Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and Randall Cobb. How about that? I totally forgot that Randall Cobb was a Dallas Cowboy for a season. In 2020, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb as a rookie, and Michael Gallup, wide receiver 15, 22, and 38. In 2021, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, and Cedric Wilson, wide receiver 19, 27, 45. Then Amari Cooper gets traded to Cleveland, so now it is just the CeeDee Lamb show. He's the wide receiver 5, wide receiver 61, 66 with Noah Brown and Michael Gallup. And then last year with LA, Keenan Allen was the wide receiver 8. Josh Palmer was the wide receiver 65, and Quentin Johnson was the wide receiver 74. I know a lot of you will say, well, Mike Williams was there. He only played 3 games. I'm leaving him out of the discussion. I want to focus on the Dallas years because in those 4 years, they averaged the second highest points per game of any offense besides Kansas City, who was the top. Second most points. But when 2 quality wide receivers are present in this Kellen Moore offense, neither crack the top 10, especially the 1B or the number 2 guy. And in this scenario, in this season for Philly, it's Devonta Smith. Wide receiver 22, wide receiver 22, wide receiver 27, 61, and 65 is how all of the 1Bs and wide receiver 2s have finished in Kellen Moore's offenses. And like I said, Devonta Smith is going as a fringe top 15 wide receiver right now in dynasty formats. I feel like you capitalize on the fact that, hey, this is going to be a high scoring offense while realizing the likelihood that Devonta Smith finishes inside the top 15 seems pretty slim, especially when you go out and sign Saquon Barkley, who, let's just be honest, Kellen Moore is not afraid to just keep running the ball. So I think it's just way too high of value for Devonta Smith that you can tear down to go, I don't know, Zay Flowers. Could you do a Zay Flowers? Could you do, I don't know, could you do, there was another name that I had thought of.
You could do Zay Flowers plus for Devonta Smith. I think you could totally get that return.
Yeah. So I'll just keep it there. I just think right now Devonta Smith's value is inflated just because he's going to be on an offense that scores a lot of points, but I don't think that necessarily means that Devonta Smith himself will put up a ton of fantasy points.
Devonta Smith feels like the prime guy of talent versus statistics and situation, because I love Devonta Smith, the talent, but unless if I'm scouting college prospects who have nothing to give me on the NFL field, I typically lean analytics more than I do talent in the NFL. And that isn't to say talent doesn't boil into it, because a lot of times we do come back to the argument of, well, talent wins out. I just don't know if that's the case here for Devonta when you look at when it's been him, AJ Brown, and Dallas Goedert all out on the field. Now you boil Saquon Barkley into this as well, and then he's going to have something to say about making sure he gets his touches. His value is high, his volatility is also high, in my opinion. But Cameron, I'll let you come to the defense of Devonta Smith, because clearly I am the one who agrees with Tyler, and you are the one who does not.
Yeah, you look at Devonta Smith last year, right? It was 112 targets. It was very disappointing from just a volume standpoint. But let's not forget, the Eagles had just one of the biggest meltdowns over the second half of the season of any team to start out as good as they did. I just think the way that it looked, it was not great. If you watch that offense, do you remember what the critique of that offense was? It was one of the worst. They had one of the worst play callers, in the entire NFL. Like that offense was stagnant. The season before, he had 136 targets. They go out and they give AJ Brown $32 million guaranteed, or $32 million a year this season. But they also gave Devonta Smith, I think it was $25 million a year. So the plan has to be to use both, right? You're not going to give that kind of money to him to not use it. And I'm not saying money's, the whole thing, but I do think that it does factor in a little bit. And for me, Devonta Smith, he's been consistently, 7 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. He had 5 his rookie season. He's over 1,100 yards. He's bouncing around that 12 to 13 yards per reception. If we can see Devonta Smith get 140 targets in this offense, get 130 targets in this offense, which I don't think is out of the realm of possibilities after what we saw in 2022, then I think, we're probably back in for another top 10 season from Devonta Smith. He was wide receiver 10 in 2022. So that's why I still think that there's enough upside for Smith in this offense. And I think even though they brought in Barkley, I don't think that necessarily changes how much they run the ball, right? They ran the ball a crap ton already last year. So even if they run it more, it's not going to be like they're completely flipping the script. So that's why I'm still in on Devonta Smith. I still think that he has that upside there.
Yeah, Brett Coleman, he called it the Philadelphia Eagles are running a high school offense. And so I do think that's worth taking into account when we're talking about Devonta Smith. But again, when it comes to there's enough change there where I think you can make the case that Devonta Smith is more of a hold than he is a sell. But frankly, if I'm looking to strip down a bit, acquire some future capital, Devonta Smith is one of the first guys I am looking to in terms of, what if I do go pick up a JSN plus, a Zay Flowers plus? Like, I'm not afraid to strip down from Devonta Smith and pick up a few more assets in the process that might not be as big of booms, but maybe give me a little bit more floor and I pick up some future capital in the process. So I think there's a case both ways. I lean more of the sell, but I think you could certainly lean him being more of a hold with the case that you just made, Cameron. I'll keep it moving. I'm going to talk about another wide receiver, another younger wide receiver. And I frankly might just be able to close the case on George Pickens being a sell by simply telling you that Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are his quarterbacks in an Arthur Smith offense. Cameron, why don't you talk about your second sell? No. And look, that's no hate to Justin Fields, because I bring up Justin Fields and I already know Bears fans, Steelers fans are going to say, he's not that bad. He's not that bad. I do think he's a better quarterback than people give him credit for, but let's not act like he's a top 15 quarterback in the league, people. Like, let's not push the cart ahead of the horse here. He's still got a bit to prove. He got traded for a 6th round pick, for crying out loud. Yeah. I think that says something about how NFL teams view him. All right. Now, while the Steelers added only Roman Wilson during the draft, again, no disrespect to Roman Wilson, but a 3rd round pick when teams were speculating Brian Thomas Jr. could have landed there. I would agree that George Pickens is a fantasy winner from the NFL draft. I would agree with that statement. That being said, I would much rather capitalize on him now that his value is going up. because this is a guy who only had 1/3 of his games inside of the top 30 wide receivers last year, and he finished as the wide receiver 40 or worse in 10 of those games.
Oh, don't say it's so.
Look, okay, and then the counter argument is, well, he was the number 2 behind Diontae Johnson most of the year, Lucas. Come on, he's the number 1 now. I don't think we should really overinflate Arthur Smith being the offensive coordinator and Russell Wilson as improvements here, right? Like, again, we might be getting a little too far ahead of ourselves here. So even in Atlanta, right? Drake London, who, can we all agree, the better prospect, the better player than George Pickens in the NFL, hasn't had a higher finish than the wide receiver 36 in PPR formats. Like, again, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Let's not get too crazy with George Pickens. Yeah. I just feel like this is a game we can play before it's even started and get ahead of the curve on George Pickens before his value falls off. Go ahead, trade him. He's ahead of Rashee Rice right now.
Yeah.
Like, that is a no-brainer. I will trade straight up. I will give you George Pickens for Rashee Rice straight up. You don't even have to give me a plus. You don't have to give me a future fourth. Whatever.
I'd give you a plus. If I had George Pickens, I'd give George Pickens plus to get Rashee Rice.
To get Rashee Rice, right. Right. That's what we're looking at, right? We can play this game before it's even started. Go out and get ahead of the curve on George Pickens. I just don't think this is a good situation that we can overinflate his value on. Simple as that.
I agree. It's Arthur Smith. And that's what it comes down to for me. Like, what is the upside with George Pickens? Like, what is the upside case? Wide receiver 24? Cool. I mean, I'm not playing that game if that's the upside.
I can get wide receiver 10 with Rashee Rice in 10 games.
Yeah. No.
It's just stupid. I don't disagree. I don't agree with the George Pickens inflation of value just because he's the number 1 in an offense that, again, is Arthur Smith better than Matt Canada? Sure.
No. Sorry.
At running the ball.
At running the ball.
With a backup running back.
Right. Let's not overinflate how better the situation. Russell Wilson probably better than Kenny Pickett, but like,
I hope so. Oh.
If we're not talking about Justin Fields as a top 15 quarterback, I think him and Russ are closer to the same tier than Russ is to the top 15. Let's be real here.
Yeah.
You made a face. Am I giving Russ too much? Look at the top 15 guys. You can even look at fantasy where these guys are being drafted. Justin Herbert is going as the quarterback 16 on Underdog Fantasy right now. You're telling me?
What are you trying to say, Ty? Spit it out.
If we're saying Russell Wilson is still a top 15 quarterback in the NFL, oh boy. Now we're cracking open a whole different can of worms.
I'm not making a face about Russell Wilson. I'm just making a face that you went on this whole tangent about George Pickens when you could have just said a guy that had 5 feet between where he's catching the ball and the out of bounds, and he couldn't get a second foot in for the touchdown against Tennessee. That is the guy that's going as a wide receiver 29 in Dynasty formats right now. Like, I'm literally looking at that picture, and I want to have high budget production instead of our handy dandy low budget production to show the picture, because it is brutal that the guy has that much space and he couldn't get 2 feet down. But if that's not like George Pickens in a single play, I don't know what is. Like, he has done nothing for me outside, like, putting production aside. He has done nothing to warrant being a top 30 wide receiver in dynasty formats. That's just my opinion on it.
Case closed. Let's move on to these last 3 cells. We can breeze through these a little bit because I think 2 of these for sure are pretty self-explanatory. Maybe we have to spend a little bit more time on one, but Cameron, your final cell candidate, going back to the running back position.
Yeah, it's Josh Jacobs. And I just want to be honest. It is never a bad time to sell a 26-year-old running back going into his second contract on a new team. Unless his name's Christian McCaffrey, then maybe you don't want to, but this guy, Josh Jacobs, is not Christian McCaffrey. His rookie year, 2019, I'm going to read you his yards per year, and I want you to tell me which year is the anomaly. He had 1,150 his rookie year, 1,065 his sophomore year, then 872, then 1,653, and then 805. I'm going to be honest. His running back 1 finish, or whatever it was, top 3 finish, where he had 1,600 yards. That's the anomaly, right? That's not the Josh Jacobs we've seen throughout his career. I will say, though, he does have the receiving upside, right? 50-plus targets over the last 3 seasons. Although he has had 197 career receptions and no receiving touchdowns. There's your fun fact. How crazy is that? So he still has upside this year, right? Like I'm not gonna sit here and say that. I'm not gonna say he's gonna have 800 yards. He's gonna be the running back 25. But at the same time, I don't think you're gonna get 1,600 rushing yards again. I don't think you're gonna see 15 rushing touchdowns from him, right? Maybe if everything goes right, you get a running back 5 season. But I think at the age 26, right, selling him where he's at, you're just not going to get that hurt because the cliff is going to come fast. It comes for everyone, and it comes quick unless your name is Christian McCaffrey or Derrick Henry, right? And even Derrick Henry, we've seen slow down a little bit. And then the other thing, too, is he is essentially, we've said it multiple times, he's essentially on a 1-year deal with 3 one-year team options. So you can say, oh, we love it in Green Bay. They kept Aaron Jones for this long. They can cut bait at any time. If Marshawn Lloyd comes out and looks like the real deal, they can go, we don't want to pay you $14 million next year. See ya, so there's that risk as well. So I get it. He could have a decent year, but at the same time, 1,500 plus rushing yards is the anomaly for Josh Jacobs.
Get him off your team. I want nothing to do with Josh Jacobs, plain simple. For that reason, 3 team options in a row. I'm with you. I want nothing to do with Josh Jacobs. Ty can give me all the faces he wants. If he wants to make the case for Josh Jacobs, go ahead. I'll die on this hill. I'll back you. I'll go to war for you, Cameron. You can sit back and relax if you want.
Deal. No. I was just going to say that he's a veteran basketball guy at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a redraft running back.
Yeah, literally a redraft running back. In Dynasty, shipped him out. Did you trade Trey Benson? Straight up?
Give me Trey Benson.
Yeah, I think I'd take Trey Benson.
Because you're getting Trey Benson plus, right? That's what because you can get plus alongside, right?
Maybe a small plus.
Yeah, like it'd be like a 4th round pick, maybe.
Well, I bet you get a 3rd at least. But I'd take Trey.
I'd take 204 and a future 3rd for Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I'd take that.
Oh, I would do that in a heartbeat. No question.
I'd take Trey Benson for sure.
Let's keep it moving. We'll move off of running backs, Ty. This is the one I think we might want to spend a little bit more time on because it's a guy we all love, a prospect we love. I just bought him in our Dynasty League. It was a 3-way trade between the 3 of us, but I also moved off some pretty old pieces to make it happen. So this is why, again, it is all situational. This was a smart move for me as I moved off of Travis Kelce and Terry McLaurin in this deal. I guess, and David Montgomery too, but Jordan Addison was part of it. There we go. I spoiled it, but Ty, I'll let you talk about Jordan Addison. It was a smart move for me, but I agree with you. I think he's a good sell candidate.
Gosh, I don't know how I go into that now because you said that it was I got good pieces too in return. Let's not.
No, I'm not. Look, I'm not. No, I didn't even out that it was you. I didn't even out that it was you.
I just felt personally attacked. That's all I was. That's all.
No. I was just naming the reality that I was the buyer.
I won the trade
because I got. Hey, shut up. Just
anyway.
Say why Jordan is a sell. Finally, God, he shuts up.
All right, Jordan Addison is a sell, and pains me to say that. It's kind of a double whammy. I'm agreeing that Christian Watson is a buy. I'm going to have so many Packer players this year in fantasy, and here I am saying that Jordan Addison is a sell. Last year was a kind of a tale of 2 halves, 3 halves maybe, with Justin Jefferson when they were both together, and then Justin Jefferson hurt his hamstring, and then they played together the last 5 weeks of the season. But in games with Justin Jefferson, right, weeks 1 through 5 for Jordan Addison, he was the wide receiver 30. In weeks 14 to 18, after Justin Jefferson came back, he was the wide receiver 31. Now in games without Justin Jefferson, he was the wide receiver 9. Wow, that's pretty good. That was also kind of a tale of 2 halves, though, because Kirk gets hurt in week 8. So in week 6 to 8 with Kirk, Jordan Addison was the wide receiver 4. That's really freaking good. Kirk gets hurt, though, and then weeks 9 to 12, because the team had to bye in week 13. 9 to 12, Jordan Addison was a wide receiver 36. Okay. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that that time, that 4-week time frame is an accurate representation of what it's going to be like moving forward, because you have Josh Dobbs, you have Nick Mullins, those two guys throwing you the ball. I thought there was a third. It's just those two guys. But the matter of the fact is, you have Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy moving forward. Okay. McCarthy can get better, more than likely will get better down the road, but there's just going to be some serious growing pains that in an offense with a guy like Justin Jefferson, it's going to affect Jordan Addison more than it is going to affect Justin Jefferson, right? So let's say 3-4 years down the road, McCarthy is now, got a couple of years as the full-time starter under his belt. How good can this offense really be, right? And especially for Addison, when you are you're fighting to be the number 2 option behind Justin Jefferson, but you're battling TJ Hawkinson then to be the number 2 option, because Kirk likes his tight ends, but I have to think that Kevin O'Connell likes having a solid receiving option at tight end in his offense, because there's a reason why they went out and got a TJ Hawkinson, right?
Yeah.
All of this to say, you can capitalize with the right person that's looking to buy a young wide receiver like a Jordan Addison, because they go, this Minnesota offense could be really good. Jordan Addison is only 22 years old. Maybe there's, you can find a player that's willing to take the shot on Jordan Addison. And honestly, even if there isn't no one that wants to take the shot on him, you can probably try to tier up with Jordan Addison. You pair him up with a second. Maybe you find your way into a Michael Pittman Jr. or into a DJ Moore, or
you would easily tier into a Michael Pittman Jr.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Or you do a first. I'm not going to sit here and say that's the right way to do it, but if you want to, you can do a first, and you're shooting for an even higher tier at that point, right?
Yeah. Check your sleeper inbox.
I know, dude. You sent me Jerry Jeudy and
a first.
No, but Jerry Jeudy
and a first.
That is like tearing down 4 tiers too many, but
it's a first. Don't worry about Jeudy.
It's a first. Look,
figure it out later.
Addison right now is valued as a fringe wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. That's pretty, I would say that's pretty accurate for what the season could be for him with Sam Darnold, JJ McCarthy behind JJ, all those kind of things. But I think there's value in the youth that he has, the situation that he can have down the road, that you can really, really optimize right now on his value.
Yeah, the thing with Jordan Addison, he's forever a wide receiver 3. I shouldn't say a wide receiver 3. Let me rephrase. He is forever the third option in this Minnesota offense. That's how I'll say it, because you have Justin Jefferson, you have TJ Hawkinson, who are both, Justin Jefferson is going to get a massive contract. He's going to get a multi-year deal. You have TJ Hawkinson, who's on a multi-year deal as well. Jordan Addison is going to be behind them from here until one of them leaves the Minnesota Vikings, right? You just look at the guys around him. Michael Pittman Jr., just one spot ahead of him, the clear-cut wide receiver 1. DJ Moore, wide receiver 1. T. Higgins, wide receiver 2, but with the upside of being a wide receiver 1 for an offense. Nico Collins, Tank Dell fighting for 2 and 3, but really, you're looking at both probably being the number 2 behind
next year.
Diggs. Right. DK Metcalf, number 1. Zay Flowers, number 1. Then you get into, JSN, Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr., Ladd McConkey, guys who have more question marks. I wouldn't tear down for those guys. But all the guys in Jordan Addison's range are going to guaranteed be 1 or 2s in their offense, with the exception of, Nico, Tank Dell. But again, you could make either of those guys the 2, and they both have a strong case. So 100% agree. You go tier up with Jordan Addison. You trade him away. You go package a first. You stumble yourself into a Jalen Waddle. You stumble yourself into a Drake London, a Chris Olave, any of those guys. You stumble into that tier, and that's what you should be looking to do with Jordan Addison. I 100% agree.
Definitely.
I'll keep this last one short and sweet, because I think the case is pretty obvious for Zamir White. Look, his contract runs through 2025, but let's not pretend that Zamir White is, the best thing since sliced bread, right? Strong close to the season last year. Nothing against the guy. I know he had 80+ rush attempts and averaged darn near 100 yards per game to close out the season, but let's not pretend that the Las Vegas Raiders offense is good. Let's not pretend that Zamir White is the future. Let's not pretend that running backs after their first contract explode onto the scene and finally break out. Like, maybe this is Zamir White's breakout year, sure, but who's to say he doesn't end up having a Josh Jacobs fall off? Not to the same extent, but you get what I'm saying. Again, we can play this game before it even starts. Go ahead and capitalize on whatever you can get for Zamir White now, because while he might give you top 15 production at the running back position, might is the key word there. I'd go ahead and trade him for any second I can finesse out of somebody and take a shot on a AD Mitchell. If I can get up to a Trey Benson, who else would be going in that? There's a name that just came to mind and now it left. If you're looking at like a super flex, I've seen Bo Nix go in the second round. Like, just go get whatever second you can for Zamir White. We can play this game before it even happens. That's where I'm at with Zamir White. Nothing against the guy, but it is the most clear-cut, obvious sell candidate that you can get at the running back position right now. And it's just because he's not elite enough to be a difference maker, and he's not going to get this massive second contract. So while he is the starting running back for the Las Vegas Raiders, go get what you can, because it's not going to be around for long.
Yeah, White. White.
Nice voice crack, pal.
Yeah, thank you. He actually, for me, I really like to use. I would like to use to go get a veteran running back.
Sure.
Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara. Because if I look at White, I'm not really expecting maybe this year, and then maybe next year we get him as a starter. I'm not expecting him to sign another contract. And that's the same thing I'd get with Derrick Henry. That's the same thing I get with Joe Mixon. That's the same thing I get with Kamara. So if you got someone who's like, ooh, I like the youth, I'll trade you this. That's the direction I would really like to go with Zamir White.
No brainer. Because you're basically getting a 1 to 2 year rental. And if someone's attracted by the youth, they can get younger. It might take you, additional player pick to get up to a Kamara maybe. But again, if someone's just infatuated by the youth, great. If I got to take a rental and who I think has far more likely to be top 10 than Zamir White, gladly, no questions asked. That is a no-brainer.
He is ranked ahead of everyone I just listed too.
Oh, gosh. Oh.
It's a crime. It's a crime.
It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. Go do it for Derrick Henry. Go get all those rushing touchdowns. He's going to score more than Zamir White this year. It's a guarantee. He's probably going to get more touches than Zamir White too. That's a no-brainer. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think people are going to fall for this situation and be like, he's the lead back. So you have to sell him now. You have
Miles Sanders.
Right.
Yes. This is exactly. This is the perfect comparison. Yep.
You cannot do it after this season. There is zero chance that his price is going to be what it is right now next year. And if it is, by golly, I'm okay.
I'll eat my words.
I'll
eat my words. Gladly. I'd rather get out too early than too late.
Well, that's the thing, is even if he's top 15, he's still going to have the same price in Dynasty as he does right now, right? I mean, because nobody's going to go unless he's top 5, which he's not going to be. He's not going to crack the top 10. So even if he's top 15, right, running back 14 this year, his price is going to be the same. So you might as well and that's if best case scenario happens.
We'll leave it there because we're all in agreement. Go capitalize on Zamir White. Anything that happens in the future will basically balance out his value, unless if, like Cameron said, he is a top, I would even say top 10 running back this year, because then his value will really skyrocket. Anything we want to add before we sign off?
Go make a Dynasty trade. It's always good to make a Dynasty trade.
Great.
Make it fair and not make it Jerry Jeudy and a first for a 22-year-old wide receiver.
You just said you would trade a first for Jordan Addison. I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Selective listening. Classic
Brutal.
from Cameron.
Brutal.
Selective listening. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Make sure you tune in. We got 2 podcasts coming a week now. We're going 2 YouTube videos a week as well, with Dynasty rankings coming out. So if you're over on the YouTube, make sure you're subscribed, turn on your notifications there. If you're listening to the podcast, we thank you. Thank you for your support over there. Make sure you leave a review, subscribe as well. We are grateful for your support. I am at Lucas Wenzel on Twitter, at CamLawFFF for Cameron, at Tyler_Platt for Tyler. You can follow the main page, FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and TikTok. Until we see you all next time, stay safe, stay healthy. Check out the Dynasty rankings on our YouTube page, and deuces.
Deuces.